Wow. My apologies to YouTube. My mic was a bit off there. Apologies, YouTube. But you all getting it over there on Instagram and TikTok. My apologies again to YouTube. We're talking about the crime situation and a ruling that came across here from a judge. And the firearms dealer has been dealing firearms for over 2 decades. His company has supplied guns, ammunition, and other services to the state, including the police, defense force, and prison. Therefore, his possession of certain weapons was not a secret to the police. Rampersad pointed out that these permits were never revoked. He also voided the various warrants obtained by Sergeant Matthew Hayward and ASP Birch. He said Birch's admission that he did not speak to anyone who granted the permits was a shocking admission. So, the head officer in charge of this investigation never spoke to anyone who granted the man the permits for the weapons. So he's investigating the man for these weapons. He has arrested the man, went to Barbados and picked the man up and rearrest him again, seized the man property, shut down the man business. Well, of course he's suing. This is what this is. And basically the judge has already ruled that he was correct, but the damages have not been ruled on yet. But the damages can be guessed. If you listen to what the judge is saying here, you could kind of have an idea of where these damages are going to head. And I believe some of these damages should come out of the police pockets. Like for things like this, that so blatantly disregard the rule of law. This is some criminal behavior, really and truly. This isn't just you made a mistake in carrying out your legal duties. No, this is some criminal behavior. You should be paying for this out of pocket. He also said not only were the warrants in breach of Thomas's rights, but the entire series of events that unfolded from ASP Birch's intervention were oppressive harassment. He also pointed out that for a significant amount of time, ASP Birch and the TTPS were in control of the second claimant's premises, and yet search warrants were being issued with increasing breadth as the days passed. But the permits wouldn't state what he can have in possession. Yes, wetback, the permits did state that. And that's the very problem that the judge is outlining. The man had clear permits saying that he had cause for having what he had. The topic we're talking about tonight is the overstepping of the legal bounds, where we're seeing that the police are overstepping bounds into the realm of the courts, and it seems like the politicians are doing the same too. Our legal system is having some friction right now. These incidents took place shortly after the Stanley John report came out, as mentioned by ASP Birch, in relation to the granting of firearms licenses by the former Commissioner of Police, Gary Griffith. And it was clearly in the public domain with respect to some sort of impropriety emanating from that tenure. One gets the impression from the one-pointed focus that ASP Birch had on these claimants that he was determined to find something which could incriminate the claimants, notwithstanding the documentary evidence before him. So the judge is saying here, it seems pretty clear from the evidence the judge is looking at, that the police determined that there was guilt beforehand and then went out searching, trying to find the evidence of that guilt after. And if we're being honest, this isn't something strange in our police service in Trinidad and Tobago. And this doesn't help cure the crime situation. It doesn't. When you have officers who determine that someone is guilty for whatever decision they have in their mind, for whatever reason they have, they determine you are guilty, and then they go about making sure they figure out how to determine your guilt, how to prove your guilt after the fact. All of the information that he was seeking was plainly obvious and available. He was aware that former commissioners of police, not just Mr. Griffith, had granted the first claimant import permits and licenses in relation to automatic weapons and what he termed to be grenades. In other words, all of the man's weapons had the requisite paperwork. That included the commissioner, Mr. Jacob. So the man had permits from the new acting commissioner back then, Mr. Jacobs. And still with that, the police was still persecuting him. There was no allegation of impropriety in the grant of those licenses, so that on the face of it, ASP Birch was plainly railroading his own summary judgment of the validity of those licenses over the claimants. So again, let's break down the legal language. The police were not alleging that the licenses the man had were fake. They were not alleging that the man got the licenses through any underhanded way. And I find that very interesting, because if they allege that the licenses were gotten through some underhanded way, then they would be incriminating other police officers. But they didn't allege that the licenses were obtained wrongfully, but yet they were investigating the man for the weapons that he obtained with the licenses. That does not add up. So then what they're trying to say, they're not trying to say anything. Positive radiation says, question, if the commissioner of police gives you legal permission, why did the junior officer go behind the man? Well, that's the question of the night, is it not, positive radiation? It could seem, I don't think that this ASP Birch just got that idea on his own. I think there was some kind of pushing in behind the scenes that was pushing to get this man found guilty, to trap this man. And now, if we look at this case and we try to see who benefits from pushing like that, look back at this case, look back at where this case was formed. This case, the point of this case was basically to prove that Gary Griffith was giving out firearm users licenses to willy-nilly. Well, there we go. His problem was first being granted the permit by Griffith. Mr. Keeler, please don't say that. You are not listening. You are not listening. The judge just threw that out. The judge just literally outlined how that cannot be the case, because he was granted licenses from other commissioners before Mr. Griffith, and he was granted licenses from the commissioner after Mr. Griffith too. So you can't point the Griffith finger here. So now the question is, who stands to benefit from this happening? Now, I don't know for sure who stands to benefit, but you let's look at this. One, who stands to benefit, and two, who is able to put pressure on the police to try to prosecute someone. Okay, so who might stand to benefit? Some people who were at the forefront of disagreeing with Mr. Griffith. Who was at the forefront of disagreeing with Mr. Griffith? Who was at the forefront of questioning Mr. Griffith with the firearm user's license? Who was the person who commissioned the Stanley John report and investigation? Who was that again? And that person who commissioned the Stanley John report that questioned the firearm users' licenses, that would have had a vested interest in making those licenses look fishy, does that person have the kind of power that they could affect police? You'll answer that question. I'm not going to say who that person was, but you could think about that. Rampersad said the weapons were in plain view and there was no attempt by Thomas to hide them when the police went to his dealership in Aranguez. It is not as though he discovered them clandestinely concealed. It is not as though the firearms were unexpectedly found by means of some search exercise. Instead, they were exactly where they were expected to have been, in the first claimant's vault. With respect to the automatic weapons, ASP Birch was aware of these things and of those permissions. However, instead of approaching it in a genuinely bona fide attempt to abate his concerns with respect to an established provider of arms and ammunition in the market of Trinidad and Tobago, involving a 61-year-old proprietor thereof with no history of or record of illegality or impropriety, he approached it antagonistically and oppressed through the ill-begotten search warrants already discussed. Without details, without specifics, and without proper information, ASP Birch and the TTPS ensconced themselves in the second claimant's premises and took it over for months. Rampersad also said the true manifestation of Birch's intent came with Thomas's abduction in Barbados. Now, listen to this. Listen to this. Let me scroll up, make sure I didn't miss anything. Listen to this part. Why the judge calls this an abduction in Barbados. And the fact that a judge called this an abduction, basically a kidnapping, makes me wonder if maybe there could be some kind of criminal prosecution to come after this. Because a judge of the courts that uphold the laws of Trinidad and Tobago in a legal court ruling called these actions an abduction. I think maybe there could be some further even criminal proceedings to go on here. He also chastised Birch's failure to provide any information to the court on Thomas's detention in Barbados. And what basis did he and Senior Superintendent Suzette Martin board a flight to that island along with Corporal Jofield to arrest Thomas? The police claimed Thomas had intended to travel to Greece, but the judge said no evidence was given by them to substantiate that claim. In the absence of any other information, and bearing in mind the chronology and fact that the court does have before it, the court is therefore at liberty to infer that ASP Birch and or other unknown members of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service caused the detention of the first claimant in Barbados by enlisting the assistance of the Barbados Police Force to so do. Somebody could potentially face criminal charges. I hope so, because this is insane. The judge went on, the judge was extremely angry in this ruling here. The very fact of the handover at the airport near the tarmac is indicative of this inference having regard to ASP Birch's involvement prior to the detention in Barbados and the handover to him. That ASP Birch and those who were involved on the day, Senior Superintendent Martin and Corporal Jofield, have not faced sanctions for their clarity and admittedly unlawful acts as police officers, as far as this court has been informed, and that they have been able to continue in their offices without investigation is, to my mind, a shameful blot on this country. The judge is saying the fact that these police still had a work is a shameful blot on the country. Listen, if you are one of these officers right now, I would advise you to start looking for new work. I would advise you to call up whoever it was pressuring you to hunt down this man with such intensity. Call them up and let them know to line up your next work. Because if a judge in the ruling has already established these things as legal fact, what is your position? The fact that ASP Birch not only returned to Trinidad with the first claimant, but was allowed to continue what seems to have been this obsessive pursuit of the first claimant by following up with 2 other search warrants issued in the excessively broad manners that they were, taking up everything in plain sight, speaks volumes for the level of oppression and harassment that these claimants have faced. Words cannot express the abhorrence that the court feels towards this unlawful act in a supposedly civilized society governed by a constitution in which the freedoms of the citizens are supposed to be protected. He said that a police officer, no less, can leave this jurisdiction in what the first claimant described to be a non-commercial airplane owned by the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, details of which ASP Birch seems to have deliberately excluded, clearly demonstrates the intention to get the first claimant at all costs. So, they used what seems to be some kind of air guard or defense force plane to go to Barbados and hunt down the man. Officer for Justice, if you're really an officer, this story is showing a bad light on you all, bro. This is showing a bad light on you. A defense force plane. The level of the determination to bring the first claimant under his control seems almost obsessive. They obviously had no jurisdiction to detain the first claimant in Barbados. The intention, therefore, was to have him detained there and to forcibly abduct him under the pretense of police legitimacy, since there's no evidence that the first claimant accompanied this contingent from Trinidad willingly. So here's this. Here's what he's saying here. The police had no jurisdiction in Barbados. So for them to have gone to Barbados, taken the man against his will, and brought him to Trinidad means they would have kidnapped him. They would have abducted the man. Not only an abduction, but an abduction across international borders. I think if someone might be willing to, some of those officers could be in for some serious legal trouble. They may have to pull on that string really hard. Whichever string was sending down the instructions, you got to pull on that really hard to provide the protection against what is coming here, seemingly. But to me, one of the worst parts of all of this, let me see if I can find that bit where they attempted to work against the court order. First, he had some, was it stated they contacted Interpol, etc.? Was there a warrant for his arrest? No. Rampersad also said the justices of the peace who signed off on them did not have reasonable information before him to do so. 5 search warrants sought and obtained in relatively quick succession with increasing expansivity. That, when coupled with the habeas corpus proceedings and the illegal abduction, reeks of oppression and harassment. This is of course all quite apart from the fact that the search warrants themselves were procured without the constitutional safeguard of due process and the protection of the law being adhered to, in light of the failure to provide information upon which the justice of the peace could have come to the judicial decision that was required of him. Now, the thing with this that makes this not that surprising. This rubber stamping, and the judge called it. The judge mentioned this apparent rubber stamping by justices of the peace involved is deprecated. This isn't new. I don't know how many of you could recall the Schoon case with the floating restaurant. Remember that case where during the pandemic and the lockdown, where you were not supposed to hold parties, a certain businessman attempted to hold, well, it was not a party according to him. He attempted to use his ocean vessel as a floating restaurant, to hold a floating restaurant shindig, not a party, a floating restaurant shindig, a soiree, might you. And the police locked it down and yada 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 yada. Now, after the police raided the whole thing and shut it down, they then obtained a warrant for the guy's private office, his business address, and his personal residence, and they searched and seized implements there. They seized his electronic devices, and then they were attempting to get a warrant to make him unlock his electronic devices. And then he sued for judicial review, and what would you know? The justice of the peace that rubber stamped those search warrants didn't even show up to court to defend it. That's to tell you the kind of level that these JPs are working with when they work with the police. The JP didn't even bother to show up to court to defend him giving out those warrants. Obviously, it was thrown out. And it seems like it's par for the course in Trinidad and Tobago. And that's not what it's supposed to be. The JP isn't supposed to be there to give the police warrants. That's the job of the JP is not to give the police warrants, you know. Their job is to determine if the police have a just reason to be granted the warrant. They are supposed to be the balancing the judgment factor right there. They're supposed to provide the justice right there. You're not supposed to rubber stamp warrants for police. Is that not corrupt? Yes, it is corrupt. Tony the Ambassador says the JPN police does good on good, so most time they get through. Yes, I know, and that's not what it's supposed to be like. It's not supposed to be like that. And obviously, the police and the JP aren't supposed to be enemies, but the JP is supposed to turn down things when they don't match the levels. And I think they should start facing consequences for these things. Like, when a JP does something like this and they lose the matter in court, that lawsuit should come out of that JP's pocket. There must be some consequence, because if there's no consequence, then they would have no reason to act better. There's no consequence, so then the JP just rubber stamps everything the police give them. It's a scratch my back, scratch your back kind of thing. If the JP gives the police whatever they want, then he knows that once he's in this district, the police are under his... You know, if I hold a party and the neighbor call the police for the JP party, you know the police not coming. If the JP son selling drugs, and I know you all live in Trinidad, so you all may know some of these stories. If the JP son selling drugs, he know that the police watching his son back, because the police and the JP are good. That's not what it's supposed to be, really and truly. Rampersad also condemned the police's apparent contempt for this court and the due process of law when he made orders for the return of Thomas's receipt book, firearm registers, firearm users licenses, the keys to his business, his mobile phone, and his handguns. He said after that order, a fresh search warrant was issued to try to stifle this court's order and bypass it. Listen to this. Listen to this dirty kind of action. In relation to Thomas's mobile phone and keys, he said when they were handed over to him, they were re-seized on alleged fresh warrant in an obvious attempt to frustrate this court's order. You all understanding this? So, the court ruled that the police must return the man's property. His receipt book, his keys, his mobile phone, his firearm user's license, his handgun, etc., etc., etc. So, the police must return it under order of the court. Okay? The police come and give it back, and then take it from the man, saying that they got a fresh warrant to re-seize it. You're understanding the levels of audacity this is on the police part? They are above the court. The court ruling doesn't matter to me, because I have a JP friend who would give me a warrant on a moment's notice to do whatever I want. I think someone needs to make a jail for something like this. The consequence for this can't just be that we sit and be like, oh my goodness, look how the police act. Because according to what the judge is saying, all of these people are still presently officers. All of them. So we at least know for sure 3 officers in the police service are willing to bend the rule of law to illegally prosecute citizens of this country. Joe says those warrants issued were over a bottle of some intoxicating substance or what? Don't know. Do not know. It is insane. It is insane. The levels that they would go through inside of this. That the police would go through to try and bring down a citizen of this country. It's kind of amazing. It is kind of amazing. And to know this is what we have to function with in this country. And the thing is, very likely, listen, the Thomas was represented by senior counsel Fiat Hussain and a couple other lawyers. A senior counsel. This man was a firearm user license holder. He was a firearms dealer. Obviously, he was a wealthy man. I believe his residence was somewhere in Flagstaff or something. This was a wealthy man. And I think that may be the reason they didn't get away with this. But What would be the portion for someone if you're caught up in a situation like this and you do not have the money to hire a senior counsel and take it to court? What's your portion? How are you going to deal with that? And I would always remember this story. This story was related to me by an officer, by a police officer. Related to me a story where a very similar thing was done. They went out on a raid and they got nothing. They went out on a raid, got nothing. Whole night, knocked down doors, nothing gotten. When they're leaving, they decide they have to get something. A guy walking in, they grab him, carry him to the station, and throw something on him. An officer told me this. And they tell him when you're reaching court is your first thing, just plead guilty and you get through. He pleads guilty, it turns out the magistrate isn't that kind and throws him in jail for a little time. What do you think happens to someone like that when they come out? What kind of behavior do you think someone like that would have? And you could wonder to yourself, how many criminals have our police created? And you know, y'all know I regularly condemn some of the actions of the police, but I'm speaking honestly here, and I think as officers, fellow officers, they need to be honest about this. You need to be honest about this, where some of your fellow officers are making your line of work much more dangerous by their actions. Hemant says the laws and methods are outdated. Time to do away with justice of the peace. Well, maybe, but what would replace it? And how would it speed up the system? RL says just to put some numbers up and say they close a case. Yeah, just for the numbers and not to look bad. And not to look bad. But that's not the only area where we're seeing some overstepping of bounds. Hines, I have a right to check judge's visit to jail. Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines said on Wednesday he was quite within his constitutional rights to check on the conditions under which High Court Judge Justice Frank Sipasad had recently visited death row at the Port of Spain prison. So Justice Frank Sipasad, in hearing a case, went down to death row to visit death row and see the conditions that the death row inmates are under. He went down there. And that apparently created some problems. The Commissioner of Prisons contacted the minister, and he told the judge that you have to get permission from the minister before you come down here. You don't just come down here, the minister has to give you permission. And now that is creating some friction. The judge is saying, no, I don't need permission, and the minister is saying I have a right to ask about what's going on there. Now, I find it kind of strange that this minister is saying he has a right to be so hands-on with the prisons, but he was the same one that was saying, you know, it's not his job to have anything to do with a crime plan. Like, won't you just, Mr. Hands-off, I am only in charge of policy? Wasn't that you just 2 weeks ago? I'm ready. How the tongue changing? 2 weeks ago, you were the policy guy. You are not hands-on. You are not there for the day-to-day runnings of these institutions. You are the policy guy. So how come you reach to knowing the inner workings when a judge is going to visit and okaying that? How come? How did that change? Suspicious. But, judge, judiciary, wrong on prison visits. A High Court judge has taken issue with a statement from the judiciary on prison visits by judges. On Tuesday, Justice Carol Gobin wrote to the manager of the judiciary's Protocol and Information Unit, Carl Francis, about her concerns over the judiciary's statement sent out on the weekend. So the judiciary also sent out a statement kinda agreeing with the minister. Kind of saying that the judges kind of have to check in with the minister before they go. The judiciary statement came after Justice Frank Sipasad condemned what he saw as an attempt by a member of the executive to interfere with judicial independence and the court's exercise of its discretion and authority. Sipasad's views concern correspondence he received from Acting Commissioner of Prisons Deoprasad Ramuta on his visit to the Port of Spain prison in a constitutional claim, and we know that. The judiciary said judges last visited the prisons and rehabilitation center in February, and these visits were on the invitation of the Commissioner of Prisons with the support of the Minister of National Security. The Registrar and the Marshal of the Supreme Court also make frequent visits in the capacity of Marshal of TNT. Now, I'm not going to read through all of that because the judge, she knows the law. She speaks the law on a daily basis, and she broke it down pretty clearly. However, Gobin says this is not the case. In asking for a correction from the judiciary, Gobin said, the judgment that you made as to the power of the Minister of National Security to make rules for visits to prisons by visiting justices and official visitors is erroneous. The minister has no such power. The prison rules which govern our prisons, including visits, were made under the West Indian Prisons Act of 1839. They were in fact made delegated legislation under the Act of 1943. These rules remain in force even today. She said under the 1943 prison rules, Section 11 provides that an official visitor may enter and inspect at any time any prison of the territory. She also said Section 14 declared the Chief Justice, the Executive Council, prison judges, and the Chief Magistrate ex officio official visitors of the prisons. And I understand this. It makes sense. No, my room is not songproof, but my voice is a lullaby to my baby, so it's no problem for the baby hearing my voice. But yes, the judge is 100% right, of course. Like, think about this for a moment. If we had the case in this country where a politician could stop the judiciary from entering the independently controlled prisons to evaluate it. Because bear in mind, the prisons is supposed to be independent of the government. The Minister of National Security isn't supposed to run the prisons, just how the Minister of National Security isn't supposed to run the police. The prisons is supposed to be just as independent as the police. So, does it make sense for the Minister of National Security to have the say over the judiciary, which is another independent branch, that is exercising oversight over the prisons, which is another independent branch? Like, of course that's not going to work. Of course you can't stop a judge from going into the prisons. Of course the judge doesn't have to tell you when they're going to come and you have to prepare for the judge. That defeats the whole purpose. Remember, the judge is looking to see the conditions that the prisoners are under in death row, I believe this case is. If the judge tells you, well, okay, prepare for me, I'm going to come, make sure you have everything prepared for me when I come next week Thursday, then you could change the conditions. That's not what you want. It doesn't make sense. And to me, that seems like an overstepping of the authority of the police. Now, my last story for the night. It's another I told you so story. Because we've been talking about crime for a long time, because I mean Trinidad is a criminal hotspot. But for a while now, I've been seeing that the direction criminality is headed in Trinidad and Tobago is going to see more fracturing happening in Trinidad. Because if you look at the crime, you're seeing geographical patterns. And with the geographical patterns, there are ethnic patterns too. I remember I spoke about this before. And you cannot expect people to be unable to notice trends even if they are in a more sensitive direction. Trends will still be noticed. Pundits, East Indians under attack by urban youth. Satyacharya Pundit Dr. Brahmanand Rambachan said East Indians are under siege by criminals, and Pundit Satyanand Maharaj said perpetrators of these crimes are urban youth from the east-west corridor. The Pundits were two of 5 religious leaders who gathered at the Madeo Mini Plaza in Arangwes on Wednesday, site of the murder of businessman Shival Ramjatan, to call on the government to do more in the fight against crime. In introducing Rambachan, Maharaj said, all the crime we have been facing in Arangwes is being committed by the urban youth, the miscreants who occupy the east-west corridor, who feel that what you have belongs to them. And I say that boldly. Criminals seem to think Arangwes people have money, but this is generational wealth. We, the citizens, are denied guns. We have no right to shoot back, so we are picked off one by one. They are products of a failed education system, of failed parenting, of a state that has thrown up its hands and said, now that you've fallen through the cracks, it's okay, stay there. They emerge post-pubescent to terrorize because they're looking for a little change to give their mother, who has 14 and 15 children, to mind. Jail is a university for them where they get to network with bigger criminals. In a statement, Rambachan said in the last few months, home invasions, attacks on businesses, houses, and people leaving the banks and walking the streets have left Trinidad and Tobago in a state of public emergency. These crimes have been directed predominantly at East Indians. The potential for civil strife looms large because people, sooner or later, are going to defend themselves. Many East Indian communities are beginning to take actions as a reaction to the inaction of the authorities. Vigilante justice must not be the response. Now, I find him saying vigilante justice must not be the response sounds nearly like he's saying vigilante justice will be the response, but okay. Here's the thing. I know many people will strongly disagree with what the man is saying. They may criticize him. I'm sure many people may call him racist. But is he wrong? That's the thing. Is he wrong? I saw a reply by, was it David Abdullah? Was it him? Guardian Media yesterday asked the TNT Police Service for a breakdown of ethnicities of victims of serious crime, inclusive of murders in the San Juan, Barataria, and El Socorro policing districts for the last 5 years. However, there was no response up until press time. Meanwhile, Senior Superintendent of the Northeastern Division, Mervyn Edwards, says he plans to meet with Arangwes residents soon. He said there will also be a walkabout, but after the meeting is held. I work to partner with the people, as I will be doing with the community of Arangwes, El Socorro, San Juan Morva, Santa Cruz, Blanchisseries, and all the districts. David Mohammed, ignorance part of the problem, contacted for comment on the pundit's claims yesterday. Nation of Islam TNT representative and Black Agenda Project head Dr. David Mohammed said crime in Trinidad and Tobago is multi-layered, multifaceted. is a multi-layered, multifaceted web of intentions and activities on many levels. Unfortunately, some aspects of it remain largely invisible and undetectable, while other aspects of it are overly sensationalized and amplified. Unfortunately, the black male youth of our society, many who are fighting for survival, end up being the public faces, mascots, and scapegoats for a situation that is rooted in problems that they have no control over. I totally disagree. I totally disagree. And I dislike that kind of talk. I think this kind of talk is the poison of black people the world over. This kind of lack of accountability talk, where everything is always caused by systemic problems that those poor ghetto youth have no control over. You never have control over that. It's never your fault. It's the system, and the system, and the system is oppressing you. And the history, and colonists, and the colonies, and the colonizers, and no. You're a human being. If you're an adult with a brain, you have the willpower to choose. No excusing it. There's no excusing it. And to me, I think the culture that excuses this is part of the reason that all over the world, it seems like black communities struggle with violent crime. Why is that? What were you saying there? Positive.
Good night again, Nathan. Good night.
Good night, good night.
I have always said that we don't have a restorative justice system, but we have a criminal university. So you go in there ordinary and you come out with a doctorate in criminology. I think this statement is not wrong, but the question is he right as well? It's 50-50. Reason being is you may not, and it's a raw fact. You don't see prisoners of a particular care text here shooting and killing one another on the road. However, they may take cutlass and do the same thing. They may use gramazone. So I think it's a lot to consider there. I think one, two, as we dealing with the issue of black boys killing black boys, we really had to get on to the root of it. I know it's all about your mind and how we program them. And this is why I believe media and the influence has a say on that. Also, I think we need to look at white-collar crime as well and see how, or if there is a possibility that white-collar crime plays into what we see happening on the roads and on the streets.
Of course.
Going forward.
Of course. Now, Dillinger Romeo, I cannot say 100% for certain. Now, there are many theories that could go down really miry web. So there are some theories that talk about genetics, where, and I'm trying to be all encompassing here. I'm trying to be as plain and open with all the information I know as possible with this. With black violence, there are some that talk about genetics, where there are some genetic components that seem to decrease one of the mental inhibitors kind of thing, that it seems to make black people more open to violence. It seems that's one. Also, black males seem to have more testosterone relatively than many other races, and that may also be why they were chosen as slaves all over the world too. These black people seem to have a bit of strength. Maybe some of the strength came from a little added testosterone. Now, if you know something about testosterone, now obviously it's physiological and psychological partially, but I'm trying to be all encompassing as I'm saying here. If you know anything about testosterone also increases aggression. If someone is taking extra testosterone, they have a higher likelihood of being aggressive. Males in general are more aggressive than females, because males in general have more testosterone than females. So if some males have more testosterone and you're looking at it across hundreds of millions of people, you may see some statistical differences. That's another reason. Another reason is the societal cultural impact of broken families, and broken families create broken families, and it perpetuates through time. So the black community has some of the highest rates of fatherless homes in nearly any ethnic demographic. Demographic. If you look at the black family all around the world, now you could ask what is the reason for the lack of fathers, and that may go down another road, but the fact is many of those communities have fewer fathers. One of the single most likely predictors for someone ending up in prison is growing up in a fatherless home. So now, if you combine all of those factors, it seems like you're going to end up with a very high likelihood of some increased violence. Then you put some of these people into the same community where government and states create housing. It never creates good community. You don't make communities like that. If you take 50,000 people randomly from all over the place and they're low income people and you ram them into a community like Maloney and have them live on top of each other, families don't get an opportunity to raise their own children. They can't parent their children. You don't create good communities and a good community ethic there. You create ghettos and you create slums. So on top of those other factors, you then cram them all into a very small area and you're going to have some things coming out, and the cycles kind of repeat themselves and repeat themselves and repeat themselves. And yeah, Hotep, what were you going to say there?
Yeah, there's the thing, bro, because I do speak about racism and all that good stuff, right? And systematic stuff, but one thing that catches me a lot of heat in black spaces like online is talking about the cultural aspects of things, right? Because black people do have a lack of that strong cultural aspect when it comes to family and rearing of children, and a lot of black people don't want to come around to that fact that's a contributing factor to the crime situation, especially in this country, and people don't really want to see it as that. So yeah, we could talk all day about the root causes of something, but at the end of the day, it's really up to us to fix that cultural things.
100%. And I despise the excuses for it. I despise excuses for it. You go into some communities and this is how you know a large part of it is cultural, because in communities like that, there could be people of all different races, but it's a cultural thing. You go into some communities and you see 4-year-olds and they're already cussing and on the side of the road, and you understand they're recreating a cycle here. And then you hear how some of the people in those communities talk, like the reason we treating our child so bad is because the government didn't give us a handout. That's unwise. That it's you suffering for this. Dillinger Romeo says, how did you come by this information? Please let us know. It's according to which information you're talking about. I read a lot, I listen a lot, so that's where most of the information I get comes from. I read and listen. So I guess you might have to specify what information if you want a source. If you're talking about a source, I could give you sources on those. Are you familiar with the Willie Lynch papers? Yes. And I'm also familiar with some people who say it may be a hoax, and it doesn't totally line up with factual history. Now, in the United States, Willie Lynch wasn't the one who crippled the American family, the American black family, as much as Lyndon B. Johnson, the Democrat president of the mid-1900s, somewhere there. And he basically said that we'd have black people voting Democrat for the next 100 years. And I forgot the name of the project he called it. There was a special name for it. And what he basically did was incentivize single motherhood. So you would get paid if you have a child and you didn't have a man in the home. And then you would be put into housing if you had a child and you didn't have a man in the home. So it created that kind of dynamic. And if you look, for example, in the United States, you look at the black families in the United States, the single parent home in the United States in the 50s in black families, well, the marriage rate in terms of bearing children is upward 70-something%. And now it's, I think, 20s or lower. So what happened between the 60s and now? Like, if you think about it, from 1960 to 2023, did you think the world got more racist? That's a hard argument to make. So in the time it took for the world to get so much less racist and for there to be black president and for there to be this and that, it seems like the black culture drank poison and started killing itself. And to me, I don't think these things are difficult things to figure out, because in the United States, and I regularly quote the United States, not because I like the United States that much, but because those people take some of the most statistics. So you could get to see what happens with a lot of people with the statistics over there. The wealthiest demographic, the wealthiest ethnic group in the United States, between the 60s to now, drugs and guns. Okay, Joe, but why did the drugs and guns, why were they only in the black communities? How come the drugs and guns only caught on in the black communities? And I know you might say that the CIA ran some drugs and guns in there. Yes. That might be some of it. But it's lack of good, solid parenting. Many people allowed the community to fall apart. And you see it. You see it. It's not a racial thing because you could look. I am a black man. In case you didn't notice. I mean, you mightn't have to tell anybody this. It might be a secret, but I'm a black man. And I'm not a criminal. I'm actually a pretty big black man too. If you see me in public, you might look, hey, there's a big black guy.
I want to ask that question.
Yeah, positive. Go on.
How can we begin to change that, or how can we begin to address that stigma? Because I find far too often we hear people say, yeah, the black men, the black community, the black this, the black that, but we're not seeing the solutions coming forward.
Yes, this is a solution. This is a solution here. I am doing a solution here. I am a black, and I like to talk about that too much because it kind of makes me cringe the over focus sometimes on identity. But I'm a black man, and I'm here talking sensibility and trying to boost the accountability inside of the communities. And I'm a father, and I'm doing my job as a father. You see, how we fix it. Most of the fix has to be within our sphere. Don't think too big. Don't think big. Think your circle. Think you and those directly around you. That's how you fix it. As close as possible. What else you were saying there?
I asked because, as I had said, I think it was last night, the Empower program, and I've been to a number of the M zones in Tobago so far, and some of these exact same issues are coming out. And when they sit and they discuss it, and yes, we like to pound ministers and the politicians and so on, but sometimes we need to commend them for good efforts. I think they were going to go on us tonight at the Tropical Harbs panel this afternoon. I saw Sonny Bling and some of these guys there and showing these guys the example as they need to be good fathers and they need to take responsibility. Dillinger
Romeo, you could join the live. If you think, please join the live and educate me. If you think I'm missing something, please join and use your voice to educate all of us here. Because what I really do, I don't like the please educate yourself kind of talk that you get from a lot of the modern people. Well, educate us. Please educate yourself is an arrogant, narcissistic thing to make it seem like you know something without actually saying it. Don't say educate ourselves. Come and educate us. You can join the live. We present this opportunity. There are many people listening. You would be heard. I won't cut you off. So educate us. Go on, positive.
Yes, I'm also thinking now too. What kind of do we have to create incentives for fathers? Do we now have to say, yeah, we're going on? The mother has 3 months paternity. We're going to give you 1 month.
I don't think so.
3 months maternity, so we're going to give you guys 1 month paternity. How are we going to encourage and change that mindset in the young men to now understand the value of fatherhood?
Positive radiation. The thing, right? I've really been coming around to the idea of it's really not an incentive thing. No, here's the thing. I think like family values, marriage values, that has decreased over a period of time. Like since the 70s, 80s, those values are going down consistently. People need to value certain things again. Incentivizing young men, that's fine. But if the young men don't value family, don't value community, that's going to that going to fall flat and down. You know what I'm saying? So it's good, and politicians understand, because I think I saw an article about Minister Cox was talking about strengthening family and community and all that. So for sure, politicians understand that in order to have a proper society, they need families, they need communities, you need proper communities and proper families to get a country flowing good, because the crime situation out of control. You know, so I'll say, tell anybody that around the world. It's just how it is.
I positive. I understand the sentiment, but I don't actually think that would work. I don't think that what young men need is incentivizing into being into being fathers. I think actually that might have been the problem. I think maybe we incentivized, we made some things a little too easy. I think what some young men are looking for is the challenge. They want to feel like I is daddy. Now, something I've noticed, and I've said this to bolster for the millennial dads out there, for the men I know around my age group, I don't think I know a deadbeat dad around my age group, and I'm not just talking about my friends and people I line with. I personally find that when I look out there, many of the young men seem to be very interested in fatherhood. And many of the young men that are interested in fatherhood, they like the challenging side of it. Like, I don't know how many of you ever saw this meme. It's an old meme that recircles sometimes, and it has my hand looks like this. My hand looks like this, and a man with a kind of mechanic looking oily hand. So her hand could look like this, and they have a woman's hand all delicate and clean and stuff. Many men like that. The man wants it to be that my child is wearing good, my child is living good, my child is sleeping comfortably off of the sweat of my brow and the work that I've done. And what I think we need to do is teach some of the young men the rewarding life in some of that. Not that we need to reward them for their lack of work, but teach them the reward of working hard. Some of those carny workers who were cutting cane in the blazing hot sun for like $15 and thing. Some of those men were extremely proud of their salaries when comes salary day, because they know when my children eat, it's from my work. That's you to me. If you want to chain up the masculinity of men, don't chain it up for gunman talk and wasting your life on a clown gang leader. Chain it up for things like that. You want to be a real man? Show your masculinity there. Go conquer the world for your family. And trust me, that is an appealing thing for men. That is a very appealing thing.
That possibly might be around your age class or era. Because 2 or 3 weeks ago, I posted that exact same phrase. Is it still a flick or a goal or something as a man to have a family? To see your wife comfortable, to see your wife and your children achieve their goals. And nobody responded. And I'm now thinking, if that's no longer a goal, that's no longer seen as something to achieve, we gonna have a falling society, and we've seen the results of that now. Because so many young guys cry out for that, they miss you. There are guys who they're not allowed to see their children. Maintenance, like someone only making children to take money out of these guys, so it creates a level of demotivation, and it literally ricochets through the system. Because the guys who tell about do make child for no woman, all she wants is money from you, and you might be thinking family. You're thinking when I get old, I want some company. I want somebody to bring some water for me. But guys know, based on how things have happened historically, the younger generation didn't care about that. When my child wearing the bed shoes, or she looking good and okay. But your child needs mental support too. Do you prefer have a father that provides $1 million and you're a barrel baby, but you can't say your father tell you he love you? You know them these kind of sentimental things. So we need to break down some of these masculine ideologies we have and begin to understand that sometimes men need to be emotional at times too. You need to be vulnerable at times too.
I don't disagree. You need to be emotional. And according to what you mean by vulnerable, I would agree with that. As Pearman said, many of us young black fathers don't have that support from family and generational wealth. I fully understand that. As I was mentioning previously, the richest ethnic group in the United States are the Indians, and part of the reason for that, and not just Indians, Asians on a whole, Chinese too, is they have the family support group. So you could go out and work really hard if you know your children are taken care of by your mother and your father, and then you have your wife, mother, and her father there, and you have that support structure. So yes, that makes things a bit more difficult, and the generational wealth certainly would help. But as Positive was saying there, Pearman, at the end of the day, the main factors in success are not that. It's the nuclear family is the main factors in success. How well you maintain that nuclear family, and you could be the builder of that generational wealth. That's just the reality of the situation you find yourself in. There's nothing you could do about that. There's nothing you could do to undo the reality of where you are at. So you just have to work with that. Dillinger Romeo says, you indicated that somehow we are prone to violence. What is your genetically imperial evidence? I told you that there have been some studies that show there are some. I'd have to find the exact study. If you join my Discord server, and when I find it, I'll drop that directly for you, that show a link with one particular genetic trait that and that's not the one I was seeing as evidence. I was seeing all the possible reasons that I have heard. Our ancestors more than likely are coming from West Africa. It may be a good idea to look at that. Studies by whom? Studies by various people. So, okay, our ancestors are coming from West Africa. Do you know the history of West Africa, Dillinger Romeo? Can you go through a list of the empires of West Africa? Do you know the Songhai Empire? Do you know the Mali Empire? Do you know the Gali Empire, the Ghana Empire before that? Do you know who were the main slavers in that territory? Do you know who the Dahomey was? Do you know why the Ghana Empire folded into the Mali Empire? Do you know why the Mali Empire folded into the Songhai Empire? Did you study those things? I did read those things, and this isn't me boasting. I'm just saying that I read those things. I'm not just speaking random things here. I tried to find out some of these things. And if you look back then, the athleticism of Africa was already known. The athleticism and also some of the aggression. You look and you read some accounts, and that was already known. Like, it's strange to me that so many people will willingly accept that all the top basketballers and top dunkers are black men. All the top fastest runners are black men. There are genetic differences in athleticism, but there cannot be genetic differences in any other thing. That makes sense to you?
Yeah, that you see that thing the thing, Nathan, is that you need to understand that of course when it comes to the slave trade in of itself, the point of having human labor is how good the humans could work on a plantation, right? If you seeing that a certain group of men could work a plantation better than other groups of men, then of course they can make them work. So yes, when it comes to West and Central Africa, those men had a dominant kind of stature when it comes to aggression. It just is what it is. So it's just life. It's human.
And to me, if we want to fix some of these things, to me, that is the most important thing. You want to understand why do you think, listen, I follow all of the most racist genetic accounts on Twitter and on social media. Why do you think? I want to know if it is that it turns out there is some kind of genetic black link to aggression. I want to know that. I want to know that if I'm out the road, somebody could press a button and the black gene in me just turns into overdrive. Isn't that something you'd want to know? I'm not saying it is true. That's not the reality. But I'm saying it's something you would want to know. You don't want to hide these things. These aren't things that you don't want to know. What are your thoughts on Biden versus Trump rematch 2024? That will be very interesting. I think two of them are too old and they need to retire and go and play with their grandchildren. I think Biden especially is way too old. I think that man He needed to retire a long time ago. I don't think he is all corpus mentis either. I don't think he's all there and functioning. So that will make that election even more interesting. The last election, Biden could have hidden away and not campaigned because it was during the height of the pandemic. That next election will not be in the height of the pandemic, so some campaigning will be expected from Biden. That will be interesting to see how all of that is handled. Dillinger Romeo says Ghana today is one of the most peaceful societies. Yes, maybe. I am not saying, Dillinger, that Dillinger, oh, just don't. Yeah, I am not saying who you think will win. I am not saying, sorry about the someone was asking about the baby before. I am not saying that I think if there might be a genetic cause for increased aggression in black people, that by default, all black people are just going to be angry and violent. I am saying that even if that is the case, that is something that you would have to account for. Now, something that also increases violence is our societies that are multicultural. Ghana is more of a homogenized society. Ghana is a much older society. Stable, old, homogenized societies are generally more peaceful. Single mothers are supported and celebrated. Why single fathers don't get similar treatment? I think it may have to be just the nature of men and women. It may have to be just the nature of men and women. The nature of women are more communal. Women are more communal. So a single mother would reach out to her community more. You would have had a single mothers association before you had a single fathers association. Children are generally more emotive towards their mothers also, so they would express their gratitude towards their mother more. If a child is being raised by a single mother, chances are the child is going to tell you. If a child is being raised by a single father, it's not like they're going to boast about that to you and tout that. So it might just be a difference in male and female to some extent. And like, something to always bear in mind when you look at how society treats men and women different. A lot of how society treats men and women different is because men treat men and women different. Like judges for the same crime, a man is sentenced, I think, 20 times or 20 years more, something like that. Vancouver, Canada is very multicultural society, again, very low crime rates. Okay, Dillinger, and what's the density of Vancouver, Canada? What's the density? And what's the multiculturalism there? When you say multiculturalism, what are you talking about? So that's Vancouver
is very white.
I know. That's why I want a breakdown of that density. Of that multiculturalism. Are you talking about 80% white with a mixture, real mix up in the other 20%? So
exactly, because when you look at where in Canada has the highest crime rate, it's Toronto. Toronto is your majority multicultural place, right? That's just it. Get a bunch of people from different ethnic groups into one place, you're bound to get friction. That's just
yes, because everyone has in-group bias. Every human being is a little more biased to people inside their group. It's natural, and that is what creates tribalism. Now, the thing is, tribalism was one of the main things I focused on in some of the lives. Tribalism is natural. Tribalism was necessary for humankind to survive. If you think back to a time when humans lived in tribes, my tribe was my extended family. If I saw another tribe, 90% chance that tribe is trying to steal or rob or kill something from my tribe. I have a right to feel comfortable with my tribe and to feel some uncertainty when I look at another tribe. in group bias and tribalism. But then when you take all of these tribes and you smash them together in an area, you generally get a little more problems, and it's understandable why you get some more of those problems. And the principles of multiculturalism, you see, I think multiculturalism can work if there's an overarching dominant culture. If you attempt to do actual multiculturalism where all of the cultures are equal inside of there, that cannot work. Positive Radiation says, do you think poor parenting is transferable? Yes. Yes, I think so. I think the evidence for that would be how often you see a father who was an alcoholic and their child turns out to be an alcoholic too. So yeah, I think it's transferable like that. Just as I think good parenting is transferable too. All right. It's 11 o'clock, people. If there are not any further comments or questions, we could call it a night. It was nice as usual.
Yeah, to also speak to what you were saying about our overarching culture. If we take a look at nearly any one of the African countries, right? Because Africa is like the most diverse in terms of ethnic groups. And pick any country that has like an overarching culture, even if they have a bunch of tribes in it, they tend to get along fairly well. That's how I say, take Nigeria, for instance. Nigeria have a bunch of tribes within it.
Lots
and they fairly get along well. That's how I'm saying, and that's fine because they have an overarching culture of just being Nigerian people. So it's like it could work. But understand that biases are going to happen. It is what it is. Don't be mad at it.
Correct. And work on it. You see something, you try to figure it out, and you work on it. That's the best you can do. Belief in fatherhood, I will look into that. How are we to change that? Bro, I am attempting to do that as best I can. I teach, I talk. What more can a guy do? And as the well-known Jordan Peterson says, clean up your room. Start within your circle. So if you do as best as you can in your circle, then you could try to work outwards from there. All right, people. This has been the Mindful Live. I am your host, Nathan Spring. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. And I will see you guys in the next Mindful Live, which is going to be tomorrow evening around that 9:30 p.m. time. Until then, so you're doing a parenting program soon? I would love to, but not online. Those kind of things, if you want to do those things, I think those things need in person where you could really talk and trash things out. All right, people. Peace. Hold it down. Laters.